Hello and welcome back to OT, the podcast. We're here to talk about watches, time, and how to spend it. I'm Andy Green.
As always, I'm Felix Schultz.
You have not changed, Felix. Today's episode.
Yes.
What do we got in store?
Well, we have quite a wide-ranging discussion on the cards. You know
With whom?
You know who we're discussing with?
I know who, but I've never met them before or spoken to them before.
Yeah. Well, you were in for a roller coaster, a thrill ride, I don't know, another thing that is the same as a roller coaster or thrill ride.
Bit of banter. It's going to be a fun chat.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun chat. Joy. We're speaking to Joy Corthésy. I'm honestly, I don't know how to say her last name. I've always just called her Joy. So she is a photographer, a watch media expert. She lives in Geneva. She works for GMT that do WorldTempus, and they've got GMT Mag, and they've got a bit of a book coming out, Andy Green.
Oh, do they?
Yeah, they do. It's not just any book. It's a book with the lofty aim of covering the third millennium of watchmaking. It's called Millennium, the Watch Book, and it is a book that is going to be so epic, it is weighed in kilos rather than pages.
I love it. I can't wait to learn more about it. But
Yeah.
before we do,
We need to have a break.
And we'll be right back. Today's episode of OT, the podcast, is brought to you by eBay.
Yep, that eBay.
eBay is one of the largest watch marketplaces in the world, with a timepiece sold every 5 seconds.
So they've already sold 3 while you've been listening to this. Today, we need to talk about eBay's new Authenticity Guarantee service, where independent experts authenticate your luxury watch purchase over $2,000 so you can shop with total confidence.
Felix, tell me how this works.
Andy, it's pretty simple. Browse and shop eBay's listings with the Authenticity Guarantee badge. When you buy an eligible watch, the seller sends the watch directly to a third-party authenticator.
That's where your watch is authenticated. Leading industry experts confirm the watch and collateral matches the listing title, description, and images. They also perform a multi-point physical authentication inspection, attach a security tag to the watch, and then it's shipped with a unique authentication card.
Voila, your item is delivered safely with 2-day shipping and a signature required.
Yeah, that's cool. And what watches are eligible?
If it's a wristwatch listed at over $2,000 or expected to sell for over $2,000, it's included. Some popular brands and models are automatically included. Smartwatches, parts and accessories are not, and neither are customized watches.
Is there an additional cost, Felix?
No. Through Authenticity Guarantee, eBay picks up the tab on authentication as well as a 2-day secure shipping from the third-party authenticator to the buyer.
Now, it's important to note that this is a US-only program at the moment. But eBay are always looking to expand to global markets.
Head to ebay.com/buyauthentic to learn more about the Authenticity Guarantee.
With Authenticity Guarantee, there are no fakes, no fraud, no doubt.
Let's get back to the show.
Whew. Alrighty, Felix, we're back.
Yeah,
ready?
Look, I'm always ready and never ready. I live in a perpetual state of Schrodinger's readiness.
To recap, we've got Joy jumping on the phone. So she does the content creation over at GMT Publishing's websites, their magazines, which is GMT Mag, the Fine Watch Club, and WorldTempus.
Look, I think that what Joy does, I suspect, cannot be summed up on a resume or curriculum vitae. The real joy of what Joy brings to the table is the stuff that comes through between the roles. It's that spirit of happiness.
Oh, I like it. Well, there's only one thing to do.
Yep. Let's get her on the phone. Do you know what the first pancake's always like, Andy Green?
Hot.
It's always terrible.
Okay.
You're a vegan, though. Do you eat pancakes?
Yeah, you can make vegan pancakes.
Okay. Do you know who else I think eats a pancake or two? Maybe he's eating one right now.
I have several ideas, but who are we talking to specifically?
Our guest, who we're just about to get on the phone, Joy Corthésy. I only know her as Joy Isabel Photo from Instagram. But let's get her on the line and let's talk about all things watch, what it's like to work in watches in Switzerland, and Millennium, the Watch Book.
Right. And pancakes, apparently.
And pancakes. Hi, Joy. Are you eating pancakes?
I'm not. I feel like I should be at the moment, to be honest. Yeah. But no, I'm not. Maybe that's a mistake on my part.
But it is. Is it breakfast time there in sunny Switzerland?
Well, it's yes, it's 10 to 10, so it's 9:50. But sure, if you eat breakfast, it's like I'm awake since like 6:30. So
Nice. That seems very
Sure,
breakfast
if
good.
you
is
eat
like three
breakfast
days
at
ago for
10
me.
a.m.,
Yeah,
Brunch. It's brunch then. Pancakes
it's
are a perfect
brunch.
brunch food.
loser that
Yeah.
gets up that late.
Wow. So 1 minute in, and I'm already feeling that 2 of the 3
I'm
people in the
sorry.
call are against me.
I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. You wake up at whatever time you want to wake up.
This, so people listening to the podcast, the Swiss, when people joke about the Swiss being really punctual and funny about time, that's what we're talking about. Right there. That's a great
Mm.
example. But Joy, do you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and what you're up to when you're not having pancakes at 6 in the morning?
Oh, sure. So outside of having pancakes at 6 in the morning, which is now an outrageous lie that's about to spread on the internet, I'm a journalist based in Switzerland in the watch industry. So I currently work for GMT Publishing, which is I would say a magazine publishing house that has one of the oldest magazines in Switzerland based on watches. We
Nice.
also have WorldTempus.com
Nice.
for all things digital. And we have a couple other endeavors, including what we're launching this year called the Millennium Watch Book, which I'll talk more about in a few minutes.
Sure.
And I've been in this industry, I would say, comparatively to the other people I meet in this industry, I'm like a baby. I've been in it since 2015. I worked for Revolution magazine. So Felix and I know each other from there.
Yeah, quite the
And
pedigree.
exactly. Okay,
Well,
thank you. And
I think the last time we saw each other, we were, was it the last Basel
oh my God,
anyone was
yeah.
likely to go to? And it
Yeah.
was,
Who knew?
uh,
Who knew that at the time it was going to be the last Basel?
and
I
it was,
mean, maybe we kind of did, but
and it was one of those very, what only can happen in Basel, where we're at the Seiko booth, and there was
yes.
some gentlemen, perhaps ladies, I can't recall, pulling like candy and making candy sculptures. Do you
Yeah,
remember
I
that?
remember. Yeah. So Seiko, I was Grand Seiko. I don't know. It was like a cocktail party thing
Sure,
because
sure, sure.
at Baselworld, you would always have like a champagne at the end of the day because that's what you do.
Mm.
And to forge, business relationships. And yes, we did. We did that. And I remember I tried on like a classic kimono
Yeah,
look.
I think the
They
photos
had
are on my
that.
Instagram. Yeah.
Yes, I think you do have that, and we had really good sushi. So Seiko always
Nice.
has always had like a really good like party event vibe and everything. In terms, if I
Yeah,
had to
sure.
class like brand events, Seiko would be up there.
They were some of your funnest late in the day Basel appointments.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, for sure. And I really love their watches. I'm wearing a Seiko right now, so
Ooh, nice. What are you wearing?
yeah. I'm wearing a Seiko Presage. They're more entry level
Mm-hmm,
because I can't afford their grand Seiko pieces quite yet. But
mm-hmm.
yeah, actually I remember getting it because I had seen them in Miami for another event, and I remember flashing on that watch and asking around, how can I get it and everything, and having it delivered to me that night in Basel when you were there.
Shut up. That's cool.
I know. Yeah.
Talk
Wow.
about impulse spending.
The Basel, like these industry events this is something that people don't know, but like these industry events is when watch journalists like are like, oh, I should get that this year. If you can kind of go for it or get on the waiting list, I guess.
Low-key shopping trips.
Loki, yeah. We're not there to work. We're there to shop and schmooze, pretty much.
Yeah, love
Yeah.
it. So,
Mhm.
Joy, Felix messaged the other week and said we need to get Joy on the show, and it's because you guys made a splash recently with the announcement of the Millennium Watch Book. Can you tell us a little bit
Yes.
about that?
Yes, I can. So I'm the head of the project essentially, and the director of GMT Publishing. His name is Brice Le Chevalier. Like we're celebrating 20 years of GMT this year. Obviously, celebrations have been put off due to the current situation. That's normal. But we've started work on this book, I want to say summer of last year. It's been over a year.
Mhm.
And it's mostly stemmed from the idea that like in the industry at the moment, there's so much about watches and about watches pre 2000. But if anybody wanted to know what's been happening in the last 20 years, and you're not in the industry, it would be very difficult to find that information. It was when I was researching for this book. It's actually, if you're not a journalist, there's no, or if you haven't been in the industry, there's no really thread. So we decided to make a book that was like a coffee table book that's, like beautifully illustrated, but also has content that covers the last 20 years of the watchmaking industry, trends, technical innovation, just big changes, as well as industry players who have indelibly marked either their brand or development in the industry. We cover around 81 people actually,
Wow.
who have worked in the industry. Yeah, CEOs, creative directors, independent watchmakers who have really marked, it's the best way to say it is have really kind of changed the industry in the last 20 years, that either people really know about, or don't know about at all, which we were really trying to get. And it's the first book that is, to our knowledge at the very least, that is multi-brand like this. We don't just focus on Rolex and Patek, even though they are in it.
Sure, of course.
And it's the first book where we have over 25 journalists and industry experts who helped us with this, who worked on this, who wrote, and like all headed by an editorial committee, which I'm on, to kind of build
Steer
the
the ship.
editorial vision of this book. Yeah, exactly, and steer the ship. And yeah, it's just I don't think there's been a book that's been such a community project like this in this industry, and that has covered as broadly as we have the last 20 years of the watchmaking industry.
So you said sort of early on in there that that a lot has happened over the last 20 years. Do you mind
Mhm.
giving me and anyone listening like a top line elevator pitch? What has happened in the last 20 years of the watch industry? What are the big macro trends that people should be aware of and that they can expect to find out more about in the book?
So we have 20 thematic chapters, right? And each chapter kind of covers an aspect of the industry or a trend, or even a mechanism specifically that has
Mm.
drastically evolved in the last 20 years. And I would say, in terms of an elevator pitch, a lot has changed in the last 20
Yeah. Okay.
years, more so than before, because if it kind of anybody who's kind of looking to get initiated into watches or into watchmaking, or is arbitrarily interested in watches but doesn't know where to start, for example, to get context for this
Mm.
industry, this is the book for you. Because like especially if you're looking to get your first or second watch, these are the industry players you should know about.
Yeah. Sure.
These are the brands you should probably know about. For example, even I didn't know that the mechanism, the tourbillon, has just drastically changed in 20 years, even though it's an 18th century complication that nobody really needs anymore.
Hmm.
But it still shows up in watches all the time because people are making it more accurate, they're making it more beautiful and aesthetically pleasing, and they're making it cheaper, so more
Mm.
accessible to the wider public.
Yeah. True.
Um, we also have a chapter that for me was really interesting about patenting in the last 20 years,
Huh.
where we actually have somebody who formerly worked for the Richemont group. So they own a lot of watchmaking brands, right? And
Yeah.
of
Sure.
the really high-end luxury ones. And he worked for the past 20 years on patents, just patents alone, and how competitive it is, to patent like just the smallest component in a watch.
Hmm.
And they've just filed patents to protect also their work, and they just file patents and keep it for 20 years and think in
Just
10,
in
15
case.
years this is going to be, well, they know that it's going to be
Yeah.
relevant, which is really
Because
interesting.
you're right, because you always do sort of see brands like going, and this has got 7 patents for tiny
Yeah,
screws and things you don't think matter, but I guess
yeah.
they, it's like they do matter, because the
That's
thing that I come back to is silicon. That's something that wasn't really around 20
Oh
years
yeah,
ago.
we have a chapter on just silicon because that's been Because the two facilities that make probably, I want to say 90% of silicon components for the watch industry are here in Switzerland. And we have a chapter on just that because it drastically changed kind of how much you could make mechanical movements just in terms of volume, how accurate they would be, and how affordable they would be. So the reason
Yeah,
we're able to buy watches for $500 now that are really well made is because of silicon. Is for a lot of reasons, but also because of silicon.
that's a really cool point, especially the patent stuff. And I know that really kind of eager enthusiasts keep an eye on the patent, I guess, directories and offices, and look out for what Rolex, Tudor, Patek, all those sort of big players lodge, because it's often an indicator of what's coming down the pipeline in 2 to 5 years time.
That's precisely
And
it. Yeah.
and it's sort of and they can't hide that. So they can't hide if they're working on a new, helium escape valve or bracelet system. I think the last time it really caught my attention was a bracelet system for the Tudor P01, where they put a patent in or several in for the end links for the bracelet.
Okay.
And it was sort of this whole big deal. So that's a really cool kind of element to have in that book.
Yes,
Yeah,
and
it's
that's super
explained in a way.
detailed.
Sorry, it's
No, go, go.
explained in a way that is accessible. Like I thought it was going to be super complicated because I don't know anything. Like when you get to the real bear down mechanics and innovation of things, like I sometimes get lost in the fray, and I work and I write about this regularly. So I like to have things explained to me as dumbed down as possible, and
you.
it's done and it's done in a way that is that for me was really accessible and really made me think, oh wow, I really didn't know this, and now I understand why it functions this way and why they presented this product this year, for example, and not 3 years prior.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So, from how we've described it, anyone that is just listening and hasn't sort of seen pictures or whatever would think maybe, is this some sort of textbook? Is this like a academic tome? Can you
No,
describe the
no.
actual book to us? Like, what do what does it
Sure.
look like? How
It's
big is it?
a big, beautiful coffee table book. Like if you want a size, it's like kind of A5 format, over 300 pages. And it's really beautifully illustrated with some of the best kind of watch-based photography we could find, and everything from brands, from photographers that we know here. The text is not dense, I would say, or at least not technically dense, because we really try to make it as appealing as possible to as many people as possible, because we know that this is for the people who kind of want a beautiful item on their coffee table, but also want to learn a little bit about this. My dream would be to do like a smaller, condensed paperback version for right before whatever watchmaking event you're going to go to, and you want to sound smart, like if I could make like a cocktail party conversation starter version of this book, I would.
Yeah, so
100%.
I think it looks like it's about as big as my coffee table, so not exactly
Like you have to get a bigger
convenient for
coffee table then.
slipping into your jacket just before the
Yeah.
the
No, it's meant to be like just a really beautiful kind of, I want to say, piece of design. The cover was also designed by, this was a big coup for us. Like the cover was designed by a watch designer named Eric Giroux, who is behind some of the designs for independent brands like MB&F, but also Vacheron, and also even more, I want to say, entry-level brands like Tissot and everything. He's really been a staple in the last 20 years in terms of watch design, and he's very kindly lent us his he kind of opened the drawers of some old sketches that he had that he's never been able to use, and was just like, would you guys be interested to use any of this for the cover of your book? And we were like, of course, absolutely. So it's down to the cover and the printing and everything. Everything's been made by somebody who's in the watchmaking industry. So it's been made with a lot of like love and passion, that's for sure.
And even the fact that someone like, because I find that someone like Eric Giroux is a really interesting example of how the industry might have changed, or maybe it was always the same.
Oh, for
Um,
sure. Yeah.
yeah, because the
He,
designers, like he's designed for everyone. You know,
yes. Yeah. So you
um,
just go on his website alone and you see all the brands that he's worked for. But
well, no,
he's,
I think you only
yeah.
see half because the other ones you
Yeah.
won't know. Like the
You
big
won't know.
brands,
Yeah.
he'll sign it all away.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's that sort of behind the scenes stuff that I find really fascinating, and I'd be really keen to dig into about
And
his book.
we talk about him in the book as well, about his impact on the industry and just how he's just had such an interesting point of view on how to display. Because if you think watches have just been around for so long, and they've gone from being a really essential thing for you to have to a not so essential thing for you to have, especially in the last 20 years, that it's challenged the way he designs, because you have to go from designing a functional thing to be beautiful to designing something that's just beautiful, if that makes sense. And that kind of shifts the way you like the approach that you have towards watch design. And he's really had an interesting approach for it, for sure.
Yeah, cool. So, Joy, obviously, you're repping the book on this call to us now. But what was your role in putting this project together?
So I'm the head of the editorial, basically pretty much the entire book. I put the contributors together. Sorry. We, with the editorial committee, we decided on basically the themes and the subjects that would be covered in the book. And I specifically wrote the chapter on the evolution of women's watches in the last 20 years. We have basically 2 chapters in it that kind of cover women's watches. So one is on high jewelry stuff, like watches in the last 20 years. And that was written by Roberta Nass, who
Sure.
is a big name in the watch journalist industry and based in the US. And I'm the editor-in-chief of a women's watch magazine here in Switzerland called Lady by GMT, actually. And we only publish once a year, and I'm hoping to do more eventually, because I think it's a massively underserved part of the industry. So I wrote the women's watches chapter specifically, and kind of gathered and tried to have editorial vision for the rest of the book as well. Yeah.
So we'll get into the women's watches in a moment, because I know Felix really wants to dive into that.
Sure.
But you put the contributors together. Felix, did you get a call from Joy?
Oh, let's not do that.
No, so
look, Andy, I didn't want to tell you because Joy said you didn't get a call.
Felix, but only Felix. We're a 2-man deal. Okay, so you're the best placed person to tell us about the top level things within the book. And I know you kind of spoke to some wider trends over the last 20 years, but what was your sort of favorite element or elements within this book?
There are a couple things. I think for me, every chapter was interesting in its own way. I've pretty much read and reread every single one of them. For me, the really interesting thing was we have a section of the book that, like I said, covers 81 industry players in the industry, from the CEO of Rolex, Jean-Philippe Dufour, a CEO of most brands actually, to creative designers. And there were so many people I did not know about, or I did not know what they did before they arrived at the role that they're in today. And a lot of them were interviewed and everything. I wrote a couple of the profiles. And for me, that's one of the really interesting things, because you can't talk about the way watches are now, or what we love about watches now, without talking about these people.
Yeah.
And what else did I really like about this book? Sorry, I'm trying to think. It's just, there's so much that's been covered
It's like
in it.
300 pages, Andy. It's 300 pages of this book. What's your favorite page, Joy?
My one favorite. The one that has my name on it, probably. No, I'm kidding. Also working with I think we contacted probably over 40 or 50 people, but then we had to whittle it down also to people who could actually write for a project like this, you know, who
Yeah,
like contractually could contribute to something other than the media they're writing for.
Yeah, that's why I didn't
Who
get the call,
could,
Andy.
and I assumed you were so busy, you know, like I just couldn't spare my
You couldn't
like
afford me,
exactly.
so you had to go to
And
Kristian Haagen instead.
yeah, Kristian was so
I'm sure
excited
that's
to
exactly what
contribute.
happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Christian was so excited to contribute as well. He was like
He'll
asking
contribute to a
to
paper bag.
you
We've just ruined
joke,
any
but
chance of getting him on this.
yeah, you joke, Felix, but I remember how hard-eyed you were at an Omega event with him. I've never seen somebody lust after somebody else in public like
I
you
forgot
did
you were
with
there.
yeah.
Would you
I
say
remember.
frothing? That's an Australian
Oh yeah,
term.
there was definitely some drool, I want to
that's
And
say.
you
where
said hard eyes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
that's
I
where
mean,
that's
Felix. Yeah, Felix. Don't worry. I've got
yeah.
plenty to embarrass you on if
She's
you
got
want.
receipts.
So.
Joy's got the receipts.
I've got
That's
receipts.
where I introduced the local Amiga brand rep to the term scruffy daddy.
Oh yes, you did. Oh my God. Yes,
That
you
was a
did. I
good night.
remember
That was a great night.
that.
So who are you working for at the moment, Felix? Just
Okay,
let's move on.
Yeah, maybe.
so
maybe.
let's talk about something far more genteel and elegant: women's watchmaking.
Sure. Yeah, we can talk about
What's been
that.
going on in women's watchmaking in the last 20 years, Joy?
Oh my God. This is the one where I was like, I mean, every single chapter could have its own book. This could have like an entire series of big coffee table books because women's, maybe what people don't know who are listening to this is that the wristwatch as we know it today was invented for a woman in the 18th century by Breguet. Because men like to wear pocket watches. So the first wristwatch was always for women. And then it kind of developed into this thing, understandably so, that was mostly marketed towards men because men, I guess, have like a limited amount of accessories, and watches were like this one thing that really, especially the luxury watch, that amounted to success. You know, you get to a certain point where you earn a certain amount, you buy a Rolex, you buy you just invest in that, right?
Yep, sure.
And the quartz crisis happened, almost sunk the mechanical watch industries in the late 80s. And then as it started going back up, brands, I want to say in the 90s, were like, we need to find new customers because people are just buying quartz watches. And they realized that there was this huge segment of clients, just women, who were buying up purses, bracelets, just jewelry and accessories in general, and already had that affinity for beautifully designed pieces that were not being marketed to, and they didn't have products for them, really, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of brands started going into it, and I want to say like some of the first big players were brands like Patek Philippe, that they launched in '99 their first quartz collection, and that was the first quartz collection ever, and that was only for women, and it's their best, called the 24, and it's their best-selling women's collection, and we don't talk about it because the Nautilus is like everybody talks about that one, right?
And I mean, it's the same with Rolex. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, the commercial ones are the Lady Datejusts and all the smaller
Exactly.
sizes.
And the
Forget
interesting
size.
thing about that in the last 20 years, and I want to say in the first half of this, from like 2000 to 2010, it's like women, what's been really interesting about women's watches is that they've really, it's a bit like what came first, chicken or the egg? Like, did brands decide to offer like a wider variety of women's watches, or did women drive that for brands? And I think it's both, but I think it's particularly clear that women kind of drove a more diverse strategy for women's watches because, I cannot tell you the amount of retailers that I've talked to from all over, from any market, who have said to me, we try to push like women's, like watches that are specifically designed for women, and they keep going towards the men's watches. And there's a reason for that. Yeah.
Well, here's a question. Do you, and Felix and I often talk about this, but do you think that watches should be gendered?
No, I don't think so at all. And I think we're trying to get Closer to that, I was talking to the CEO of this brand called Zenith, Julien Tornard, and he told me that their strategy. Sorry to name drop.
It's okay.
Humble brag.
Humble brag.
We're just having pancakes with Julian.
Just breakfast. By the third mimosa, he was telling me anyway. He told me that their strategy kind of going onwards is to not gender their watches anymore, because he was like, it just doesn't make sense. Like in terms of just from a business point of view, just if you take societal context aside, from a business point of view, it makes more sense to market to as many people as possible. So your watches need to reflect that a little bit. So they've started marketing their Defy Classic to be worn by both men and women in all of their publicity, which I think is a great step forward. An interesting watch that has really made a boom was the Chanel J12, which was introduced in 2000, has developed over the few years, and that was initially meant to be just a women's watch, and from memory, but it very quickly became just a watch for anybody, really. And it's actually
100%.
celebrating its 20th anniversary this year. And that's a watch that I think for me is very has no gender. Anybody can wear it. Diamonds or no diamonds. You've got men wearing gem set pieces now. You've got women wearing big bold divers watches. It just matters less and less now, and it should matter less and less in
it's a bit ridiculous. I mean, I look at the you mentioned Patek, the 7118, which is the Nautilus Ladies Automatic.
Yeah.
Now that's a hair under 36 millimeters, which I think is a good size for both men and women.
For sure.
And and it's a newer release. I think it's only 2 or 3 years old when they brought this back out. But it is a bit of a shame to see it, called a ladies automatic, because I think that would probably turn a lot of men away.
Well,
but it's just a smaller Nautilus.
It is, yeah. It's a smaller Nautilus. I remember that piece. Yeah, when it had a
the wave
beige
on the
kind of
dial.
oldish. Yeah. I very distinctly remember that piece and thinking, oh, now I'd wear a Nautilus.
Yeah, me too.
And because it was my size, now.
And interestingly, you were sort of saying that women, were drawn to the larger quote unquote men's watches. I think you're seeing something at the moment with especially with the Nautilus and some of the Royal Oaks, where there's guys who can maybe get those smaller sizes a little bit easier than the jumbo or the 5711s going, I reckon I could wear a 36 millimeter Nautilus. That's totally fine. So I think they've flipped it on its head with the scarcity of those super hot models, just to, again, proving the ridiculousness of naming something for men or women.
And the thing about the watchmaking industry is that this is a product that is traditional, right? In its just concept. And the industry within itself is very traditional, right? So anything to push it forward and everything, it always takes longer in this industry. Funnily enough, that measures time. But it's really just had to move faster in the last 20 years, just because everything moves faster now, right? And instead of competing against each other, they're also competing against now electronic, smartwatches, electronic watches, Fitbits. We're just kind of there are more competitors in the field, so they've had to think smarter, they've had to think more diversely. I think the challenge has been tough, but I think more and more people are meeting it. And in terms of women's watches specifically, my favorite thing is that I think I got into the industry just at the right moment, because the offering for women now, and will continue to be so, is just getting more diverse and interesting. Because what's frustrating to me has always been that when you talk about men's watches, there are 26 subcategories of what a men's watch is.
Yeah.
There's divers watches, there's a vintage watch, there's a chronograph, there's all of that stuff. And this is where it kind of goes into being gendered watches or not, right? When you go on any brand's website, for example, there's all those subcategories, and then there's ladies' watches. And I'm like, well, I don't want something that's pink and has flowers. I'm not saying that that's not a style that women are interested in. I just think that taste is now becoming a lot more democratic. And there's an increased interest in complications, I think, coming from women. We were talking about MB&F earlier, which is like the small independent brand that does amazing, complicated watches, like just mechanical marvels that happen to be on your wrist, I think. And the Max Buser, who started MB&F, told us that one of his biggest collectors is a woman based in the Middle East. Like, she loves all of his watches, all of his complications, whether or not they're gendered. And that's kind of what gave him the idea to, as well as the women in his life, to design this first women's watch, which I think for me is one of the most successful ladies' complications, like to come out in recent years. Yeah. And I think as soon as you start to think more broadly about not just what women want, but just what people want in watches, you're a lot more successful in your offering in the end.
So you said before that, we've come a long way in terms of thinking about how we design watches for women. It's not just that, make it smaller and put some diamonds on it mentality, which I think is still very much there, in certain brands. So I wanted to put you on the spot a little bit. Who is making, if you can name a couple of brands, like across the spectrum of, your super independents through to more mainstream, who is doing women's watch design really, really well in 2020?
Or watch design in general?
Yeah,
or watch design.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Watches that appeal to women, perhaps.
I think we've got a few key players. So in the independents, for me, two come to mind. It's MB&F. It's an even smaller independent guy named Akrivia. I think he just makes not even women's watches, but just gender neutral watches that appeal to anybody.
You'd have to be blind not to think that was amazing.
Exactly. In terms of some of the bigger players, I would say who's doing really well. I mean, I would be stupid not to say Cartier. Like, it just their designs are so, and they have like a wealth of information. Like, they just have archives that go back to, in terms of fashion, that go back ages, right? And they can kind of just go into their archives and be like, yep, that's probably relevant for now, and just take that out and like modernize it a little bit.
Revive it. Yep.
Revive it as well. I think their most interesting designs are the ones that are the most weirdly shaped, like the Crash or the Baignoire. They're not the best sellers, but for me are just the most interesting in terms of design. And then who else? Who is doing watches? Audemars Piguet for me has adapted. So they came out with the Royal Oak Frosted Gold, which I talk about in my chapter, a few years ago. And that's a really interesting story because the Royal Oak was always a man's watch, right? And was one of those watches, much like Rolex, that was adopted by women, that even though it was intentionally targeted towards men.
Yep.
And the Royal Oak Frosted Gold came out from this jewelry designer named Carolina Bucci, who wore the Royal Oak in for men. And the CEO of Audemars Piguet, François-Henri Benamias, saw it on her and was like, "Why are you wearing that? Why are you wearing a man's watch when we have plenty of women's watches to offer?" And she just very flatly told him, "None of your women's watches are good for me."
Amazing.
Which is kind of amazing. She's a very bold, like, you can tell she just says what's on her mind, which is great. And she told him, none of your watches are adequate for me. They're not designed for women like me, who like to be bold, but who also like to push the boundaries a little bit of what is more classically, I guess, designed. And she decided to buy, like, just at the time was a big Royal Oak, which was like 44 millimeters or something, which is big on her wrist. And they collaborated and kind of sized down the Royal Oak, and also did this beautiful treatment of the metal that it looks like glitter, but it's really just kind of, I want to say, almost mini scratches, and it kind of on everything on the metal, so it kind of looks like it's almost gem set, but it isn't. It's just a treatment of the metal. And that for me was like, oh, this is a women's approach to a man's design that works really well, because she didn't think to add diamonds or make the dial mother of pearl. You know, she treated the metal of it, like the bracelet of it, and made it a piece of jewelry, as well as like a watch that had like a really good pedigree to it.
Sure.
And Bulgari as well for me is doing really well. I think
Bam. That's
their
I'd 100% agree with you on all of that.
their Octo Finissimo is for me genderless, and their Serpentine watches are they really play the line between jewelry and also really fine watchmaking as well. Like they came out with a tourbillon in it. That's the smallest tourbillon in the world, and it's gorgeous.
Would you wear one? Would you wear an Octo Finissimo?
Yes,
The big
I've
ones?
worn one. Yeah, no, I
Super
like.
big.
It's big, yeah. It's big, but when it's when it's sized to your wrist, it's great. Sorry.
No, that's all right. I was just I'm really keen to hear your take on how it wore. Obviously, it is a little bit bigger, and that's probably something that's kept me away for a little while. But if you've worn it sized up properly, I'm curious. So, how long did you wear it? How did you go with it?
So I tested it for a bit, and we also had a special edition made with GMT Publishing version of it. So I got to wear it kind of a bunch, and so I would say for me personally, because Andy, I don't know what size you would usually wear. Like, would you gravitate towards 38 millimeter or 40 or
40's about, we're
40 is about it?
39
Okay.
to 40, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm about the same. For me, 38 is a perfect size. I'll wear a 40. 36 is a tad small for my taste, but it works as well in terms of proportion. The Octo for me, why it works in a lot of ways is because it's so thin that one, you don't feel the weight of a larger case size. I would love for it to come out in 39 or 38, but I always felt strange about being like, the thinnest watch in the world, could you make it a tad smaller for me, please? You know, like I feel so arrogant to say that to Bulgari.
I 100% agree. Like it's slightly, I think, too large for me because of the shape. Like the square makes it hang a little bit too much, but make it a couple of millimeters smaller. I'm all over it.
I think if they were to do that, and I suspect that's what they're working on.
Sure.
And they've got all the technology. They've got the watchmaking like department to do it, right, to break another record, no problem. I think the day they do that, Asia is going to go insane for it, to be honest.
Yep. 100%.
Can't you just open Photoshop up and click and drag the corner down?
Exactly. Yeah, you'd think it's easier, but turns out there's a lot that goes into it. I was talking to one of the designers. One of the watchmakers that came that worked on it, and I was just like, "Is it possible to make it smaller?" And he was just like, "God, we already spent like 6 years making it thinner. Now you want it smaller too?" And I'm like, "Well, sorry, it's a question."
leave the watchmaking to the watchmakers.
Oh yeah.
So speaking of Photoshop, you're pretty handy with the camera and do quite a bit of photography.
I do.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about that, because you shoot watches in particular?
Yeah, I do. So I came into this industry. So my background is in journalism and photography. So I came into this industry just wanting to be a journalist and to work for a magazine, and I really developed a love for watches. And I studied photography, and just my original love of photography is for portraiture, for taking photos of people and everything. And I as the more and more I got into watches, the more I photographed watches as well. I mean, that's part of one of my main jobs for GMT Publishing is to coordinate and shoot photo shoots for the magazine and for the website. And I love it. Every watch is different and poses its own challenges, just like people, kind of thing, in terms of watchmaking. In terms of photography. And I've been kind of given access to like a mini studio here, which has made me a lot more flexible in terms of what I can photograph and how I photograph watches now. Also, being based in Geneva, we get like prototypes and everything just sent to us really easily, which is nice, and I can snap photos
Amazing.
yeah.
Amazing.
So the access here is really great. And in terms of photography, I personally like doing stuff that's worn, and because I personally think that studio photography is great and it's a talent of its own, especially when it comes to watches. But
Mm.
I find it most interesting to see them kind of what it's like in daylight, because that's how we're going to wear it, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And that's I think how they should be photographed. So I do mostly lifestyle stuff for watches, and yeah, it's interesting, it's creative, which is what I love. And
What do you shoot on, Joy?
so I shoot on a Nikon D600, which is the camera that I studied with, that I
Okay.
paid for with my first salary when I worked for the Richemont Group, and I've stuck with it this entire time, and with pretty much the same lenses. I know you shoot with a Leica, Andy.
Oh, here and there.
No, here and there, yeah. I actually did
He
a
takes
series.
it everywhere.
Everywhere I go.
That's
It's the
the great
Q2.
thing
It's a
about
really
Leica.
versatile piece. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the great thing about Leicas, because they're really easy to transport. My Nikon I love it, but it's super heavy compared to other cameras and everything.
Well,
So
it's made for work, and when you're using your camera, any tips for shooting watches? I know firsthand it can be quite tricky, but I'd love to
mhm.
hear, your kind of top tips and maybe some advice.
Some advice, I have a lot of people actually ask me this, especially because they're like, I just want to take better photos, for Instagram and everything. And I'm like, that's great. And they keep telling me, what camera should I get? And I'm like, first of all, your smartphone camera is super, just has has probably some of the best camera technology on the market. So
Mm,
it doesn't. I've always been of the mind that it doesn't really matter the tool you have; it matters how you use it. And for watches specifically, it's how light hits a watch, right?
yeah.
So what really works, I think, in terms of a few tips, I guess I could give some of your listeners is, um, don't think that just because it's a really sunny day, it's great for light, because it actually, for watches, it's terrible,
Yeah.
because you just get a really awful glare on it. Unless you're really lucky, you can get really bad glares on it. You get sunspot. It's honestly, if you want to get a clear shot of the watch, you don't want a sunny day. You want a really overcast day, because then light is just dispersed really beautifully and really evenly on your watch and on your skin tone as well.
Mm,
So that's usually better. If you have a really sunny day, go to a big window, and any light colored curtain will work great as a light diffuser
Mhm.
for lighting. So I would always kind of go for that. Oh, and a top tip, and Andy, I don't want to call you out, but I saw a couple of your Instagram posts that are offenders of this.
uh-oh.
Sorry,
Oh my
is
god,
never
this is great.
photograph the watch crown down, if that
Why
makes
not?
sense.
See,
So,
wow.
so and that's
I want to hear your side. I'm going to argue
so
this.
go ahead, argue it. But so this is only because I've been an offender of this,
Mm,
and I was told by a couple watchmakers, said they hate it when they see photos with the crown side down, because putting a watch crown side down on a hard surface can potentially damage the mechanism, apparently.
Andy Green.
well, I was told,
Yes, tell
and
me.
this is why I do it with my watches anyways. The crown is actually the cheapest part to replace on a
It
watch.
is the cheapest
So
part to replace,
if you're
yes.
going to scratch anything, I'd want to be scratching the crown and not the side of the case. So that's why I do it.
So, small tip. So, what I've learned from doing photo shoots with expensive watches that have security guards, coming with them,
Sure.
is that if you want to take a photo of a watch, but you don't want to scratch it, especially if it's gold, because basically gold, you breathe on it and there's a scratch.
Yeah, of course.
You take masking tape, or I don't know what you call it in Australia, but I call it sticky tack. It's for to hang up posters and everything. It's
Blue
Yeah.
tack.
play
Blue
the
tack.
blue tack. Yes, thank you. And you put that under the watch, and you can mold it in a certain way that you don't see it in the angle, but it protects the metal from the surface. And you can, if you kind of use it in a certain way, you can put it on the watch, and not see it, and it won't damage the watch at all, or the buckle, depending on the metal it's on. And you can take it off and it won't leave, and wipe it down and it'll be fine. The little
That's
tip.
a really good tip. Yep.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to
Either
that
that
gold
and
watch
is a
doesn't
great
have to
tip.
touch anything.
Yeah, and blue tack will do that. Masking tape will do that if you bend it a certain way, and that's a really good way around and making sure to protect the watch that you're shooting. But you're right, the crown is the cheapest part to remove. So like if whatever happens and everything, it's crown side down. But if you don't know what you're doing with a watch, like say the crown is out and then you put it crown side down, it can actually
that's
kind
a
of
good point.
right. So that's why I kind of was just like, oh, okay, maybe tell people that crown side down might not be great. But also it just depends what kind of surface you're doing it on. So
I just think it looks visually better with the crown up. Have I been conditioned?
It's how you look at a watch, right?
Yeah,
So
sure.
you want to look at it the way you would read a watch, and the crown is typically on your right. So you want to,
What if there's crowns on both sides? What do I do then?
Andy,
flat
you get your blue tack.
flat.
Get your blue tack
Yes.
out.
You get your blue
Straight on.
tack. You get your blue tack, and then you shoot it side down. Yeah, I've had those watches. They're difficult.
So Joy, I've got an idea.
Tell
What we're
me.
going to do is we're going to get blue tack, and we're going to relabel it watch molding tack,
What?
and we're going to
then sell it.
For 4 to 5 times markup.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
great. Yeah.
Make it green. Make it in Switzerland. It'll be great.
Yeah. It'll be great.
Can I share? I've got a great watch photography tip that is not mine. It's from a previous guest of the podcast, of the one and only James Stacey from Grey NATO and a Dinghy.
James, yeah.
So his one, and it was very, very clever, was because he, when he's sort of shooting in Basel, it's pretty quick, half-hour appointments. Yes. He always tries to wear a white shirt so that he's got a little reflector on.
Yep, that's great. And always have a sheet of just a plain that you should find anywhere. A plain sheet of white paper works great as well. Because I like.
Does too.
Sorry.
Baking paper does too as well. It helps.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's I mean, you can get really great shots with very little equipment. You don't need amazing studio equipment to do amazing watches. It helps, but sometimes it just complicates things.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
I find it stressful. I find the idea of the whole studio thing way too stressful for me. So
I did too. Because I was always better shooting in the wild. I think I still am. But once you learn to work in a studio and everything's kind of yours, and nobody else touches your equipment. I hate it when people touch my equipment. It gets easier, and you do kind of have when you have time, especially, you can kind of experiment a little more. But like stuff like Basel and everything is it's chaos. It's too short, and you have very little time and like one prototype or something. So
I always love seeing, and it's usually like the Japanese press. They come in with like these little rolling setups, and I remember one, and they had like water droppers to get that that sort of misting underwater dive effect, and it's all in like a 20-minute appointment. It's like nuts.
It's nuts.
There are some guys that are just crazy at sort of those quick, it's overwhelming for me. But speaking of Switzerland and Basel, you're in Geneva, as you mentioned.
Yes.
Now, Felix likes to point out just how far away Australia is from, the heart of the Swiss watchmaking.
Yeah.
But you're pretty close, and you mentioned a couple of great advantages. What's sort of the best thing about being based in Geneva?
We're in the heart of it all. Like it's so in Geneva specifically, you have all the boutiques basically of the brands, but you also have a lot of the PR departments who are based here. So I'll run into them just like going to a yoga class or getting coffee at this place. And you really get to forge relationships outside of really pressure cooker events like salons and everything that you can't really get from those events. And as well, we're like about, I want to say, 1.5 hours to 2 hours away from where they make all of the watches that we see. So we have I would say, great access to not just the industry players like CEOs and everything and the creative directors, but also to the watchmakers who are making these every single day. And we get to talk to them, and they explain. And I've never met a watchmaker who didn't want to talk about the watch that he's working on, and they've been on it or in it for like 20 years, and they just work quietly at their little station day in and day out for 8 hours. It takes amazing concentration. Like, it's just, they're always fascinating people to talk to. And we have access to them. Like, if I wanted to understand, say, how something worked on the octo finissimo movement, for example, for an article, I could call them up and not just get them on the phone, but I could be like, I'm actually in town on Tuesday. Can I just swing by and then you can maybe show me?
I'm very jealous of you right now.
What a
It's so,
flex.
sorry, but yes, we get to do that. We also get to. I was talking about this with Suzanne Wong, a colleague of mine, and she was telling me, and she's got way better access than I do because of who she is, of course.
Yeah.
But she was telling me, I'll have coffee with the creative director of this brand, and like lunch with the CEO when he's in town of MB&F, actually. And it'll just happen. I can pop by. You mentioned it, Felix. I could pop by Akrivia. They do like kind of weekly aperos in their atelier, like where they make the watches and everything. And
Yeah, sure.
I'll get a chance to like see what they're working on and everything, and not be able to report on it, but I'll be able to be like, this is really great. We're actually got a piece on this complication. If you can get the photos ready by this date, I'll have it in the magazine, type thing. And it's that type of stuff where you really just, the access is quite unprecedented. We do get to see stuff first, I guess.
Yeah.
Which is always great. But it's just being able to talk to the people and kind of know them outside of the industry, and being able to like WhatsApp them and just be like, hey, are you in town? Do you want to grab coffee? And
Just had a
that's,
question about this thing. Yeah, wow, that's
yeah.
amazing. Just to not to whinge, but
Tell me.
I just want to sort of contrast that a little bit with sort of an experience for me, which might be, oh, I've got a question that's not in, that I don't know, I can't find easily, and it's not in the press release. So I will typically go through the Australian brand representatives. They will pass it
Yeah.
on, and maybe in like a month's time, I might get
You'll
a
get a
reply
response
back
from the
saying,
headquarters.
no, not even. It's like, they don't know.
Yeah.
That's the typical. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to ask you.
Yeah, do
That's
that.
way better. Yeah, that's you're spot on. It's like, what's this strap made of?
Yeah,
We don't
exactly.
know.
Just ask me, and ask me, or ask Suzanne Wong. Like, like, she'll definitely know. And another thing that we have access to, it's not just the watchmakers and everything, but like the local press here, journalists and local press here. Because I'm bilingual, I can read stuff that's already published in French first, and know some of the industry news already, because
Yeah,
stuff
sure.
is written in the local language, so it'll be French and German, right? And then translated into English eventually if it's published internationally. Like, for example, the recent Swatch Group news, where they had a reshuffle of all the CEOs and everything, that we got early on. And it's just kind of stuff because local journalists here have access through other means, because they cover more than just the watchmaking or luxury.
It's a national business. It's an important trade.
Exactly. And it employs a great many people here in this country, that any industry news we get first. And I know the people who work on who work on the Baselworld committee, and on the
Sure.
Watches and Wonders committee, and all those people. So it's always rumors, it's always rumblings, but it's a good way for us to pivot in a certain way. Or we know, oh, we probably shouldn't talk to this person, or we should talk to this person because they're more in the know. So it's very helpful. It was very helpful for the Millennium Watch Book, because in 2020 alone, so many things changed that we had to pivot certain things in the book itself, because we had to mention the fact that Baselworld and Watches and Wonders, like the two biggest, formerly SIHH, the two biggest events in the watch industry, were canceled. So
yeah, there would have
for
been
the first time ever.
some late minute chapter rewrites there, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, and we're still going through rewrites, just trying to. Well, rewrites in the sense that, like, yes, we want to be factually correct as to what's happening this year as well, but also tonally, we don't want to be, we don't want to be like tonally kind of deaf to what's happening in the industry right
Yeah.
now.
Of course.
So this book, the Millennium Watch Book, is a celebration of the last 20 years of all the work and all of the changes that have happened in just 20 years since 2000, and in light of what's happening today and how hard we're being hit. I mean, so many times in the book itself, we mentioned the 2008 financial crisis, just because that really affected strategy as well, and products that were eventually kind of on offer for 10 years after that. So
Yeah. So speaking of crisis and being in Geneva, one question which I think you can clear up better than we can, and we get asked a lot. If I go to Switzerland, is it a lot easier to get access to those hot Rolex, Patek, and AP that we've mentioned? They just have them on display, right?
yes, so
Great.
you could just just go. Okay, it just
You've got them
depends
at
on
the
what.
airport.
And I can buy
Yeah.
wholesale from the factories, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. No, listen, you get definitely easier access to the manufacturers where all the watches are, and then it just depends on the brand. Rolex is notoriously a fortress, even to us Swiss journalists, honestly. And you really
Especially
have to
to
be
you.
very, especially to us, exactly, because Rolex isn't just watches. Like people would like to know, but Rolex also owns an insane amount of property here in Switzerland.
They have a
Huh.
bridge, right? They have the
Yeah,
Hans Waldorf Bridge.
it's not just
Yeah.
bridge, but like they own like land that or buildings and everything that are hospitals here and everything. So a lot of their revenue kind of comes from that, and everything when it comes to numbers and everything is kind of shut up because everything Rolex does is always notoriously kind of in a bubble, right? So
Sure.
when you work at Rolex, you are in the Rolex community. I know a couple of people who work at Rolex and who are like, I signed like 3 non-disclosure agreements. I'm not telling you jack shit. Sorry, I don't know if I can swear, but
You can. You're
sorry.
welcome.
Uh, and Patek is a bit more accessible, a little bit more accessible.
Cool.
But that doesn't mean I can just call up the CEO and president and just be like, "Yo, where's the Nautilus at?" And type
Yeah.
thing.
many
He can't even.
Jamaicans
One
with
for Felix and Andy. Yeah.
Yeah,
Terry.
yeah. Terry,
We
can
need
you, Terry,
2 more for Australia,
what's up with the
please.
tweeting list? Yeah.
Yeah, you need
Um,
to send another 2 to Melbourne. Went on this
yeah.
podcast. He's
Yeah, no,
he's a
I'll just call
subscriber.
him up.
So
Yeah, he he even has notoriously kind of said to us like, listen, I can't even barely get my hands on one, like, and I'm the CEO. Like, it's just it's that kind of
Wow.
ridiculous amount of inaccessibility for that
I mean,
particular watch anyway.
yeah, I mean, he can. But
He
speaking
can't.
of,
Yeah.
well, we appreciate that recommendation, but we'd like
Yeah.
some other recommendations on things, maybe other than watches and, obviously the Millennium Watch Book. But
Mhm.
what else are you into? What else can you kind of recommend to the listeners? Maybe something you've been listening to, watching, reading lately.
Just that's watch related or not?
No,
Like, I don't.
not watches. We don't
Left
want
of
watches. We've
field,
had enough watches for now.
your
Well
non-watch
then
podcast.
if
You've
we've had
finished a
enough
hard day
watches.
at the office.
What are you doing?
What do you look forward to when you get home?
Okay, so I like to go. We've got a really great lake. I like to go swimming in the lake, especially in this heat. But other than like kind of exercise type thing, I'm a Netflix type of girl. I watch a lot of stuff.
What are you watching?
So I recently started Snowpiercer, which is this
Ooh.
adaptation of a comic book that's here at the very least available on Netflix weekly.
Yep.
You too.
And it's really great and interesting. I just got Disney Plus, which has just
me
been made
too.
available in Switzerland. And I'm like, oh, I'm watching a few things, but I'm also like, I mean, I could just kind of watch this stuff other places, weirdly. Like, it's just, I'm a little bit disappointed by the offering from it so far. I just
Can I
want to
just say,
watch the
Joy,
stuff. Yeah, tell me.
Disney Plus really comes into its own when you have children.
That's what yes,
as
exactly.
a
So
father and
that's
someone
what,
with an active Disney Plus subscription, I will
yeah.
advocate for it strongly. It's amazing.
Yeah, no, that's what I figured, that Disney Plus is great for parents.
All about DuckTales. That's my recommendation. DuckTales.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have children, but I regularly babysit my now 7-year-old niece, and I didn't tell her I got Disney Plus. I don't think I would, because I just don't know what she'll make me watch. But I've gone
Frozen
through
2.
Peppa Pig. I've gone through Peppa Pig, man, on Netflix, and I'm over it.
Wow, nice.
And what else am I watching or reading? I don't know. There's just been so much
Snowpiercer is pretty
stuff,
good.
especially.
Snowpiercer is solid.
Snowpiercer is great. Yeah,
Yeah,
I just finished
Snowpiercer.
that.
Yeah, Snowpiercer is really great. I'm kind of, maybe because of like COVID times and everything. I'm trying to just watch stuff that's a bit happier or a bit less, apocalypse ish.
No harrowing documentaries about famines.
Oh yeah, no, I'm not interested
No one
in
has
that.
time for that right now.
I've watched a couple things that have really kind of educated me on the social movements happening at the moment, like Black
Yeah,
Lives
sure.
Matter and everything, that have really kind of educated me, and listened to a lot of podcasts. I mean, I listen to your podcast as well, but I listen to a lot of this podcast called Pod Save the People, which kind of enlightens you on the Black Lives Matter movement, which has been really interesting. Oh, a podcast I'll readily recommend, Revisionist History by Malcolm Gladwell.
Yeah, great.
I don't know if you've heard of it.
Yeah.
It's so interesting, and every episode is like a story about this person or this object that nobody talks about, and everything is I just really love that. I get engrossed in that like it's a show or like a movie and everything, on my commute. So I really love that podcast. I listen to that one a lot. Oh,
That's
and
solid.
I watched the Michael Jordan, like everybody, the Last Dance
Nice.
documentary,
Yeah.
and certainly had an appreciation for that. He's a watch collector too, Michael
Yeah, he's got
Jordan.
some serious watches. We'll definitely
Oh,
link all those up. Those many excellent recommendations.
oh, sorry, too many.
No, never too many, especially in these days. But
Yeah.
so can you just let us know how should people follow GMT, follow yourself, get in touch with the book, order the book, all that sort of jazz.
So the Millennium Watch Book is currently available on pre-order at a preferential rate right now, on thewatchbook.com with sorry, it's the-watch-book.com.
Cool.
It's available in French and in English. We're currently kind of taking interest into any other languages people might want. If there's an exceeding order for those, then we'll
Make it
probably
happen.
exactly make it happen. But right now it's available in French and in English on thewatchbook.com. You can also follow the Millennium Watch Book on Instagram. You can follow me on Instagram at Joy Isabel Photo for watch photography and photography in general. We are also at GMT Magazine on Instagram,
Mhm.
and WorldTempus on Instagram as well. We've got a lot of accounts.
You're all over Instagram. And one last
We're
question.
all over. Yes.
When is the book? It's on pre-order at the moment. When is it on? When is it on shelves, as they say?
So we're printing and delivery is aimed for end of October, beginning of November right now.
Just
Just
in time for
in time for
Christmas.
Christmas.
Just in time for
Just in time for
Christmas,
Christmas.
exactly. So
We're gonna
if
have one of those
you're,
Christmases, aren't we, Felix?
yes,
You get it for me, I get it for you. Joy
Nice.
gets it for both of us.
guys, and that would be such great gifts and everything. We could sign it for you if you'd like.
Ooh. Wow.
Tell me a
Only if you,
CEO, and I'll get them to sign it.
only if you can get Kristian Haagen to sign it. Then I'm in.
Oh, you got it. I'll even you know what? He can write a little message to you. He won't just sign it. It'll
Whoa.
be to you, Felix, and
Not
to
for
you,
sale.
Andy, if you'd like. Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
not for sale. So it's available on pre-order now. It'll go at full price in about a month, and then it'll be delivery and everything should be end of October, beginning of November, just in time for Christmas, like you said. Yeah,
Outstanding.
Well,
Well,
great gift. Yeah.
I can't wait to get it on my coffee table.
Yes, I can't wait to be able to deliver it to you guys.
Cool. Well, Joy,
Yeah.
thank you so much for jumping on the show. It's great to have you.
Oh, happy to be here. Thanks, guys.
Felix, I am hurting with my stomach hurts with the amount of laughter.
Yeah, it was
just transpired.
let's be honest, that was bordering on unprofessional.
It was a little bit loosey-goosey, but geez, that was fun.
Yeah, I liked how she ripped into you for the quality of your photography, something for which you're quite proud of. And I like to
Oh,
see
look,
you.
I'm no expert, but crowns down for life. That's all I'll say. We got a hashtag trending, and
Wow. There's some beef started. Did it want to make you chatting to Joy? Did it want to make you move to Geneva?
Oh, 100%. You know, the thought of doing Pilates next to, brand CEOs and scoring sweet allocations through my flexibility sounds pretty cool.
Wow, all about that flex. So I think if we disturbing images of Andy doing Pilates aside,
Depends what you're into.
Let's try and keep people listening, not turn them off.
Mm.
Joy, she exists in the podcast, but she also exists on Instagram. To follow her there, it is at Joy Isabel Photo.
Yes, and to suss out a copy of the Millennium Watch Book,
Yep.
head to the-watch-book.com/EN for the English readers.
Oh, nice.
And we'll link that up. We'll link up a bit of coverage of the book.
Yep.
I'm pretty sure by the sounds of things, it's going to be here for Christmas. So, Felix.
Hopefully. We'll also have to link up like WorldTempus and all those guys.
100%.
You know what else we need to link up?
Today's episode sponsor.
Boom.
Thank you so much for supporting the show.
Always good to support OT by supporting our sponsors. It's something that keeps these sweet episodes hitting your inbox. I don't know.
Pays for this sweet bundle of joy that we call OT the podcast.
Wow. So if people want to follow us, that's at ot.podcast on Instagram, and you can always email us. How do they email us, Andy?
Of course, they can email us. Our email address is otthepodcast@gmail.com. And of course, thank you to our sponsor, but also thank you to our producer, Majorton Media, for putting this all together. So we'll see you guys next time.
All right. See you next time.